As the summer heat of 2025 bears down on Washington, D.C., the political theater surrounding U.S. trade policy reaches a fever pitch, with the spotlight fixed squarely on the northern border. August 1st, that seemingly arbitrary date circled in red on the calendars of diplomats and economists alike, has come and gone, leaving in its wake not the explosive resolution many anticipated but a simmering tension that speaks volumes about the state of American alliances. We've all watched as the administration, led by the ever-unpredictable figure in the Oval Office, let's refer to him as the maestro of the White House, with his flair for dramatic pronouncements, pushed forward with a strategy that blends bravado with brinkmanship. The promise was clear. By August 1st, most trade deals would be wrapped up, sealed with the kind of flourish that makes for great headlines. But when it came to Canada, our closest neighbor and largest trading partner, things didn't unfold quite as scripted. From the outset, the negotiations, or what passed for them, felt more like a high-stakes poker game than a diplomatic dialogue. The White House hadn't exactly rolled out the red carpet for Canada. Instead, it seemed content to let the relationship fester under the threat of tariffs. "We haven't really had a lot of luck with Canada," the maestro mused in one of his characteristic off-the-cuff remarks, suggesting that perhaps the northern giant would simply absorb the pain of tariffs rather than bend to a new agreement. As August 1st loomed, there was no extension of an olive branch, no late-night huddles to iron out differences. Instead, the approach was akin to loading a shotgun and calling it a conversation starter. Canada, long seen as a reliable ally in the grand tapestry of North American economics, suddenly found itself on the outside looking in, facing mounting pressure to concede or face the consequences. Imagine the scene. A 35% tariff slapped on every Canadian import unless Ottawa signed off on a deal that suited the White House's tastes. Not the one they'd already hammered out, mind you, but a revised version forged under duress, just before the buzzer sounded. It was a tactic straight out of a reality TV playbook, where deadlines create drama and concessions come from desperation. Yet, here's where the narrative takes an intriguing turn. Canada didn't erupt in protest. There were no fiery speeches on Parliament Hill, no barrage of indignant tweets flooding social media. Instead, our northern neighbors responded with a poised silence that echoed louder than any outburst. They smiled politely, nodded acknowledgement, and began redirecting their shipments to other shores. No tantrums, no public meltdowns, just a quiet pivot that reshaped the economic landscape without a single raised voice. This silence in diplomacy, as any seasoned observer knows, carries the weight of a resounding slap. Enter the USMCA, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, which on paper remains theoretically intact, a beacon of trilateral cooperation. Over 90% of Canadian exports to the U.S. should, in theory, flow duty-free, so long as they adhere to the established rules of origin. It sounds like the perfect setup, a deal that benefits all parties, fostering economic interdependence in a world increasingly fractured by global rivalries. But lurking in the shadows of this agreement is a relic from another era. Section 232, a provision dusted off from the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. This legal tool, originally designed to protect national security, has been wielded like a hidden dagger in recent years. Under the current administration, it justified tariffs of up to 50% on key Canadian commodities: steel, aluminum, copper, and auto parts. These weren't minor adjustments, they were punishing blows that caught Canada off guard. Ottawa had every reason to believe the USMCA shielded them from such aggressions, yet here they were, facing what felt like a betrayal from within the very framework they'd trusted. Now, with the volume cranked up once more, the White House issued warnings that if Canada didn't capitulate by August 1st, those 35% tariffs would blanket everything crossing the border, not merely metals, but the full spectrum of goods. This wasn't presented as a compromise or a mutual give and take, it was a glaring ultimatum, a neon sign blinking obey or suffer. It stripped away any pretense of allied camaraderie, replacing it with the raw dynamics of power imbalance. Canada's leaders, from Prime Minister Mark Carney to Minister Dominic LeBlanc and the provincial premiers, found themselves in rare unison. Their mantra was straightforward: no deal is better than a bad one rushed under the barrel of a tariff gun. This stance wasn't mere political theater, it represented a fundamental rejection of coercion, a defense of the spirit, if not always the letter, of international agreements. In place of a hasty handshake, we witnessed a standoff. Compromise gave way to calculated resistance, and the USMCA, while still enshrined on paper, lost its soul in the process. Trust, that fragile glue holding alliances together, evaporated like morning dew under the harsh sun of unilateral actions. The numbers tell a compelling story of this pivot. Canadian exports to the U.S., which once accounted for 75.9% of their total outbound trade, plummeted to 68.3% between May 2024 and May 2025, one of the sharpest declines in recent history. This wasn't a mere reshuffling of decks, it was a wholesale rewriting of economic priorities. Nearly 29% of Canadian companies have actively shifted away from U.S.-centric trade, while 37% are now sourcing materials from alternative nations. It's a seismic shift, a strategic recalibration that speaks to resilience rather than retreat. What we're left with is a treaty on paper, but a vacuum where trust once resided. The White House may favor bombastic declarations, but Canada opted for quiet restructuring over panic. The USMCA endures as the nominal rulebook, yet Canada's secret weapon lies in their refusal to succumb to political theater. For those weary of bullhorn diplomacy, this is the true betrayal, not the tariffs themselves, but the systematic erasure of mutual respect. Fast forward to the end of July 2025 and the timer toward August 1st continues its inexorable march. Canada's venerable USMCA remains more vibrant in legal text than in practical application, but the real showdown looms on the horizon, the 2026 Joint Review, a clause embedded in the agreement that will test the mettle of all involved. The president in the big seat might view trade as show business, complete with spotlights and applause, but Canada is honing its approach for substantive negotiation, not a fleeting photo op. This review provision mandates that the parties convene in July 2026 to decide the pact's fate, renew it for another 16 years if consensus holds, or set the clock ticking toward expiration if discord prevails. Enter Bill C-5, the Canadian Economy Act passed in June 2025. Far from mere domestic tinkering, this legislation represents a comprehensive reboot. It streamlines trade frictions between provinces, accelerates infrastructure projects, and integrates inter-provincial businesses with Arctic logistics. Canada isn't merely leaning on U.S. exports, it's rewiring its entire economic infrastructure for self-reliance and diversification. Trade flow data underscores this evolution. That drop from 75% to 68% in U.S.-bound exports isn't withdrawal, it's deliberate realignment. Companies are diversifying supply chains, and Ottawa is forging pacts with Mercosur nations, Southeast Asia, and beyond. Even as the August deadline scrolled across news tickers, Canada wasn't content with legal countermeasures alone. They were constructing a northern fortress independent of White House whims. Bill C-5 transcended bureaucratic adjustments. It birthed an Arctic blueprint, appointing Virginia Mers, a seasoned Inuit leader from Iqaluit, as Canada's inaugural Arctic ambassador. This move elevated Northern voices on the global stage, signaling that Canada's polar interests aren't beholden to U.S. directives. Further bolstering this, new consulates sprouted in Anchorage and Greenland, broadcasting Canada's intent to forge northern alliances autonomously. The financial commitment was equally robust. A $6 billion CAD infusion into over-the-horizon radar, clean energy initiatives and logistics corridors, augmented by $420 million CAD for enhanced military presence and Inuit-led surveillance. This wasn't performative, it was a calculated assertion of sovereignty, intertwining infrastructure with indigenous governance. Why does the Arctic matter so profoundly? It's no longer a desolate expanse but a treasure trove of lithium, cobalt, and rare earth minerals, essentials for electric vehicles, semiconductors, and advanced weaponry. By partnering with Inuit communities rather than distant bureaucrats, Canada ensures control over extraction and oversight. The implicit message to the White House: disrespect indigenous sovereignty or fair trade, and access is denied. While the world applauded the White House for swift deals with Japan, the UK, Indonesia, and the Philippines in July 2025, Canada, America's premier trading partner, received no such courtship. The rationale? They already have the USMCA, no need for fresh overtures. It was a silent dismissal, a shrug that belied deeper fractures. Meanwhile, tariffs rained down, 25% on steel and aluminum in February, expanding to general goods by March, then doubling to 50% on metals in June. The August threat of 35% across the board loomed as the culmination. This aggression didn't foster loyalty, it fractured it. Canada's export share to the U.S. dipped from 75% to 68% by mid-2025, marking not a detour, but a profound pivot. By mid-2025, as tariffs flew and applause echoed for superficial pacts, Canada redrew the Arctic map, sidelining the U.S. at the Arctic Council chairmanship handover from Norway to Greenland under Denmark. Canada deepened ties with Denmark, Norway, and Greenland, leaving Washington on the periphery. In a region where Russia and China accelerate their advances, America's role appears ornamental rather than commanding. Compounding this, the U.S. grapples with mineral dependencies. Per the 2024 U.S. Geological Survey, over 70% of rare earths are imported from China, with 90% refined there. Canada, conversely, cultivates Arctic assets through indigenous-led efforts, staking claims to vital resources. Their stance is unequivocal. No respect for sovereignty or equity means no invitation to the table. By late July 2025, the North American dynamics evolved further. Canada and Mexico, both recipients of tariff ultimatums, convened bilateral talks, transforming threats into opportunities for unity. No White House fanfare, just pragmatic border-spanning collaboration. Southward, Brazil, facing 50% tariffs, swiveled toward BRICS, Asia, and regional blocs, refusing subordination. Colombia, Argentina, and Chile similarly probed paths to disentangle from U.S. reliance. This isn't fleeting discord, it's a subtle decoupling. America isn't just shedding economic ties, it's hemorrhaging trust and intangible no levy can reclaim. Nations are authoring fresh narratives without awaiting Oval Office nods. In the closing act, no doors slam, chairs simply empty. Mexico, Canada, Brazil, Colombia, they didn't bellow defiance, they rerouted destinies. Amid proclamations of deals and equity from the White House, whispers ripple globally. We've progressed. Tariffs may dictate prices but not allegiances. Bullying erodes trust, and when Canada averts its gaze silently, the U.S. forfeits more than lumber or aluminum. It loses a confidant who once deemed the pact sacrosanct. So ponder this. Is America steering the dialogue, or upending it in fits of insecurity? Are we forging bonds or incinerating them for fleeting acclaim? In the evolving saga of international affairs, the answers may determine whether we stand fortified or isolated.